The notion that the ghetto black was the authentic black not only spread among both white and black intellectuals, it had social repercussions far beyond the intellectual community. Rooting black identity in a counterproductive culture not only reduced incentives to move beyond that culture, it cut off those within that culture from other blacks who had advanced beyond it, who might otherwise have been sources of examples, knowledge, and experience that could have been useful to those less fortunate. But more successful blacks were increasingly depicted as either irrelevant non-members of the black community or even as traitors to it. In turn, this meant that many blacks who had a wider cultural exposure and greater socioeconomic success felt a need to conform, to some degree or another, to a more narrow ghetto view of the world, perhaps using ghetto language in order to prove their identity with their own race. Such social pressures become especially acute for young blacks in the schools and colleges. One consequence of this has been that counterproductive attitudes toward education have filtered upward into black middle-class young people raised in racially integrated middle-class communities such as Shaker Heights, who spend less time on their studies than their white or Asian American classmates, under the overhanging threat of being accused of acting white if they devote themselves to their studies instead of to various social activities in which other black students indulge. The painful irony is that those who make this accusation are themselves acting white when they perpetuate a redneck culture from a bygone era. Even such a modern ghetto creation as gangster rap echoes the violence, arrogance, loose sexuality, and self-dramatization common for centuries in white redneck culture, and speaks in exaggerated cadences common in the oratory of rednecks in both the antebellum South and those parts of Britain from which their ancestors came. It is not only the cultural peculiarities of the black ghetto culture which has been perpetuated by the identity fetish developed in the post-1960s era. What has also been promoted has been a conformity of beliefs and affirmations among blacks, with those with different viewpoints being banished from consideration intellectually and ostracized socially, at least insofar as identity advocates succeed in imposing their straitjacket on others. Not only behavioral litmus tests, but ideological litmus tests have been used by those promoting a black identity fetish, with those who do not pass such litmus tests being dismissed as not really black. This post-1960s black identity intolerance, promoted by white intellectuals as well as black leaders and activists, is a painful parallel to the post-1830s intolerance among white Southerners against anyone who questioned slavery in any way. Maintaining what has been aptly called an intellectual blockade against ideas differing from those prevailing in the South, antebellum Southerners not only insulated themselves from ideas and viewpoints originating outside the region, but, at the same time, in effect drove out of the South independent-minded people who would not march in lockstep. The resulting narrow and unquestioning conformity of that era led the South into the blind alley of a civil war that devastated wide sections of the region and left a legacy of bitterness that lasted for generations. It can only be hoped that today's narrow intolerance promoted by a black identity fetish will not lead into similarly disastrous blind alleys. Summary and implications. It would be good to know what proportion of either the black or the white population, past or present, could be considered culturally rednecks. While it is undoubtedly true that the South was not a monolithic region, the issue here is how it differed from other regions, not its internal variations. What is known is that the white population of the antebellum South as a whole was strikingly different from the white population of the North, not only in the eyes of contemporary observers, but also in objective statistics that are an undeniable part of the historical record. What is also known is that while about one-third of the white population of the United States lived in the antebellum South, 9/10 of the black population lived there at that time. Thus, a culture which produced lower levels of achievements for both blacks and whites, compared to other members of their respective races from different cultures, was more pervasive among blacks. The lesser educational and other opportunities for blacks are consistent with the longer persistence of this counterproductive culture among those who have not yet risen out of low-income ghettos. In addition to the negative effect of the redneck culture on the achievements of both blacks and whites, it has also, for generations, provoked adverse reactions to rednecks of either race by others. Calling all adverse reactions racism in the case of blacks explains nothing when people of that same race have been treated very differently at different periods of American history, as well as in different parts of the country at the same time. There is no reason to rule out a priori the possibility that different subgroups of blacks were themselves different in behavior, attitudes, skills, and performances. That has already become apparent when comparing blacks from the Caribbean with blacks from the South, or when comparing blacks from the New England enclaves in the South with blacks from the redneck culture. Easy recourse to slavery as an explanation of either North-South differences or black-white differences fails empirical tests. Not only did the main features of the redneck culture exist in Britain, centuries before blacks and whites encountered each other in the antebellum South, if slavery was the reason for the South's lags behind the North, then emancipation should have led to a narrowing of the economic and other gaps between the two regions. Contemporaries who drew this logical conclusion were subsequently disappointed by what actually happened in the wake of the end of slavery. Per capita real income in the South, which had been 81% of the national average in 1860, fell to 51% by 1880 and remained at about that level for another generation, long past the time when the decline might have been plausibly explained by the damage suffered during the Civil War. However obtrusive and morally salient slavery might be, it failed to carry the heavy burden placed on it as an explanatory factor, then or now. The counterproductive redneck culture that eroded away over the generations among both whites and blacks has been rescued after the 1960s by a multicultural ideology that has made this residual survival among ghetto blacks a sacrosanct badge of racial identity, not to be tampered with by teachers or criticized by others, under pain of being labeled racist. It should also be noted that both cultural transformations within the South and a large return migration of blacks to the South in the late 20th century make the redneck culture no longer a regional phenomenon, but a largely urban ghetto phenomenon, North and South, with a certain amount of outward diffusion, to middle-class black youngsters especially. Blanket application of the term racism as a causal explanation, as distinguished from simply an epithet, cannot explain why blacks who were living in white neighborhoods at the beginning of the 20th century could no longer do so 2 decades later, or 5 decades later. After all, those who lived interspersed among whites in the earlier period were of the same race as those who could not do so in the middle of the 20th century. The Ku Klux Klan was certainly a racist organization, but that description cannot explain why it began to make major inroads among whites in northern states after a mass migration of blacks from the South had moved into those states. Like the ghettoization of blacks in northern cities, where they had once lived dispersed among the white population, the spread of the Klan's racist organizations into northern communities had to have some causal explanation. It is hard to see these two major retrogressions in race relations as mere coincidences that just happened to occur after the migrations of Southern blacks into northern cities. In short, cultural differences have had a major economic and social impact. Despite a tendency to attribute black-white differences in the United States to a legacy of slavery, blacks from the West Indies also had a history of enslavement, but brought with them to the United States a very different culture that was reflected in such things as differences from the native-born black population in entrepreneurship, education, and imprisonment rates. In short, what the two groups of blacks shared was a history of enslavement, but what they did not share was the redneck culture. The disproportionate number of prominent blacks who came out of small enclaves of transplanted New England culture in the South likewise underscores the impact of cultural differences. While only circumstantial evidence is possible on the connection between the cultural characteristics of Southern rednecks or crackers in the past and those of ghetto blacks today, that evidence is considerable. However, even if one were to dismiss all of that evidence as sheer coincidence, the redneck culture would still not be irrelevant, for it provides a demonstration of the counterproductive effects of such a way of life. external explanations of black-white differences, discrimination or poverty, for example, seem to many to be more amenable to public policy than internal explanations such as culture. Those with this point of view tend to resist cultural explanations, but there is yet another reason why some resist understanding the counterproductive effects of an anachronistic culture. Alternative explanations of economic and social lags provide a more satisfying ability to blame all such lags on the sins of others, such as racism or discrimination. Equally important, such external explanations require no painful internal changes in the black population, but leave all changes to whites, who are seen as needing to be harangued, threatened, or otherwise forced to change. In short, prevailing explanations provide an alibi for those who lag, and an alibi is for many an enormously valuable asset that they are unlikely to give up easily. As Eric Hoffer put it, there are many who find a good alibi far more attractive than an achievement, for an achievement does not settle anything permanently. We still have to prove our worth anew each day. We have to prove that we are as good today as we were yesterday. But when we have a valid alibi for not achieving anything, we are fixed, so to speak, for life. However, as he said elsewhere, America is the worst place for alibis. Sooner or later, the most solid alibi begins to sound hollow. Those who provide black rednecks with alibis do no favor to them, to other blacks, or to the larger society in which we all live. In American society, achievement is what ultimately brings respect, including self-respect. Only for those who have written off blacks' potential for achievement will alibis be an acceptable substitute. The liberal vision of blacks' fate as being almost wholly in the hands of whites is a debilitating message for those blacks who take it seriously, however convenient it may be for those who are receptive to an alibi. Whether black redneck values and lifestyle are a lineal descendant of white redneck values and lifestyle, as suggested here, or a social phenomenon arising independently within the black community and only coincidentally similar, it is still a way of life that has been tested before and found wanting, as shown by its erosion over the generations among whites who experienced its counterproductive consequences. By making black redneck behavior a sacrosanct part of black cultural identity, white liberals and others who excuse, celebrate, or otherwise perpetuate that lifestyle not only preserve it among that fraction of the black population which has not yet escaped from it, but have contributed to its spread up the social scale to middle-class black young people who feel a need to be true to their racial identity, lest they be thought to be acting white. It is the spread of a social poison, however much either black or white intellectuals try to pretty it up or try to find some deeper meaning in it.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to Obsidian Radio, the voice of the everyday brother. And it is MLK Day, January 15th, 2018. Welcome to the program. Glad you can make it, and thank you for listening. I so greatly and deeply appreciate it, my friends. Woo-wee! A whole lot has been going on here, all over the internet and the interwebs and the news dispatches. People sending me all kind of stuff to opine upon. But I thought to kick off today's special holiday show, it's so fitting that we do this on MLK Day, with something that came across my desk a bit earlier. It came to my attention that fellow black male YouTuber, The Angry Man, has taken to his new YouTube channel. His original one has apparently been taken down by the YouTube Pilot Bureau. That's most unfortunate. You all know my views about that situation. But he's come back. He's resurgent with a new channel. And he has an interesting video up there entitled "The Definition of a Coon." Now, this is in reference to a conversation that he and I had over on Black Gnostic Speaks' channel, I'd say maybe a week ago. The most recent hangout we did together. And Black Gnostics regulars that was over there. And the whole thing ostensibly got started over the question of drug legalization of recreational drugs, marijuana, heroin, cocaine, crack, crank, crystal meth, whatever. Okay. And since Black Gnostic is based in California and a number of his listeners are also based there, it was discussed within that context of the Golden State. And it was suggested that the discussion was how to capitalize on this new growth industry of the legal drugs trade. We all know about the state of Colorado. They have legalized marijuana in their state, and there's other municipalities around the country that are seeking to emulate its example. Here in the city of Philadelphia, and I noticed this in the hangout that I'm talking about here with regard to Angry Man, I noted that here in the city of Philadelphia, current mayor Jim Kenney, who used to be a councilman out of South Philadelphia, he's the current mayor right now. While he was a councilman, he lobbied hard for a kind of Colorado situation here. That is to say that it used to be here in the city of Philadelphia, if a individual, and we'll go ahead and just use the stereotypical young black male, if you will, was during a routine stop by the police, discovered to have a quantity of marijuana on him, the police could be within their discretion to take him down to the station, basically book him for possession of illegal drugs. He being Jim Kenney, then councilman, now mayor, pushed very hard to eliminate that. So now here in the city of Philadelphia, if that same black male gets, routinely stopped by police here in the city of Philadelphia, if the drugs is discovered on him, and of course you can't have a huge break of marijuana. We're talking about a small amount for personal use, a dime bag or two. The police aren't necessarily going to run him in for that. And personally, I think that's a good idea. I'm all for legalization of drugs. I don't partake myself. There's some other problems I have with the drug culture that I'm going to get into in a moment that gets more to apparently what's bothering the Angry Man about yours truly. But in principle, I don't have a problem with legalization of drugs. I believe that if people want to, indulge and they want to partake, that's their business. Just the same thing with alcohol. If you want to partake and indulge, that's your business. So there should be, like alcohol, there should be certain safeguards on it, things like that. Of course, minors and not being, under the influence of drugs while operating machinery such as vehicles and things of that nature. But other than that, like I said, what we have in place already for like cigarettes, alcohol, whatever, I think the same thing should apply to the drug trade. Now, what got this whole thing really started with this hangout that precipitated Angry Man's making this video, the definition of a coon, and he's calling me a coon. Okay, so let's get to that. I made the comment and the remark that a lot of your drug-related arrests and a lot of the people that are behind bars, and we'll just go ahead and put a final point on it, a lot of the black men that are behind bars for drug-related offenses is usually in connection with some degree of violence. See, if you know anything about the drug game, and I happen to know quite a bit about it, because I've talked about this before, back when I was like 18 years old, I had a really good friend of mine, we called him Spanish Ed, down in the Badlands. Matter of fact, he used to live at, I want to say 9th and Cambria in North Philly. Had the bars around the house and the whole bit. If you know anything about Hispanic folks in Philly and other northern cities, they tend to have bars around the entire house, not just bars on the door. I'm talking about the entire crib has bars around it. He was the same age as me, about 18, 19 at the time. And he had his own house. That was the first time I ever saw a really huge, today they'd be common, 60-inch screen TVs, flat screens. Back then they weren't flat screens, they were still pretty bulky. But the big screen TV sets, and he had all the latest in the video games and all the rest. And he had top of the line DJing equipment on a Porsche 911, a Lincoln Continental. He had two Kawasaki Ninja motorcycles. The whole bit. He even had his own bodyguard, Big Vince. And one day, I saw him. I was, because I would go over there because I was heavy into DJing and turntablism at the time. So one summer day, I went over to visit and to play around on his equipment. And I was watching him, and Big Vince was there with him. I was watching him count money from his drug sales. His house had a constant stream of crackheads buying crack round the clock. He had a younger brother, who was the prototypical, Steve Urkel type. He just happened to have been a Hispanic version of it. The big Coke bottle glasses and, the whole bit. And he would tend to these people. They would come up to the door. Again, the door had bars on and all the rest. They would get buzzed in through the main line of gates, and they go up there because he had cameras and all kind of shit he had. And they would go up there and they would put their payment through the slide, and he would put their amount of crack through the door. And that was a constant stream, 24 hours a day. It was not unusual to see the same crackhead getting 3, 4, 5 hits a day in there. So I'm sitting there watching Spanish Ed count this money this day, the particular day that I went to see him. I never forget it. It was a bright sunny day, I guess around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was a weekday. And I'm watching him count this money in his dining room table. I watched him count over $250,000 in cash right there in his table right there in North Philly. Over $250,000. And he had been on me for the longest to join his operation. He had a fledgling operation that he was putting together, an organization. And he said, Obsidian, a guy like you, man, is really smart like you. I could really use a guy like you in the operation. And the reason why I didn't do it, I ain't gonna lie to you, man. I was tempted by the money. He had the great DJ. I mean, he had top of the line DJing equipment back then. We're talking about late 80s, early 90s. He had top of the line stuff. By all accounts, he was the man. He was living a good life. And I looked at that money. Matter of fact, he had from the Scarface movie. You remember the money counting machine? Al Pacino? He had one of those on his desk. And behind him, the wall was lined up with like a dozen Deer Park 5-gallon jugs. Nothing but coins. One had nothing but quarters. Another had nothing but dimes. Another had nothing but nickels, pennies. And it started over the rotation again. I must have counted like a dozen of them. They were coming from crackheads who were literally nickel and diming their crack hits. Okay? And I ain't gonna lie to you, man. It was tempting. It was tempting to do that. I've known quite a few. I knew guys that was in the JBM. That's for those of you who may not be familiar with that outside of Philadelphia. The acronym JBM stands for Junior Black Mafia. They took their cue after the original Black Mafia of this 1970s. And there's a really good book if you want to know about the history of all this. And a lot of the people that's mentioned in the book, I actually know them. It's by a guy by the name of Patrick Griffin, called Black Brothers Incorporated. That's the name of the book. Black Brothers Incorporated by Patrick Griffin. He was a former cop, and then he went on to become a sociologist. And he does an excellent job breaking down the beginnings of black crime in the 1960s, that period, up through the Junior Black Mafia period. So my point being that, I'm very familiar with this. I have family members who are, involved at a fairly high level in the drug game. When I say family, I'm talking about cousins and stuff like that. One of my cousins got his brains blown out back in circa 1994 or so. And I was at his funeral and I watched two women argue over, who was really his main bitch and that sort of thing. I'm very familiar with all this. And the reason why I chose not to do it is very simple. Because of my dad. Aside from the fact that he's like the one person, in human form that I actually feared. And my thing was, I wasn't afraid of the cops getting me. I was afraid of my dad getting a hold of me. And that led to the other reason why I didn't do it in relation to my dad is because, what would my dad think of his son being a drug dealer, a criminal? I mean, that would, Sounds kind of corny, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think it would have broke his heart, man. Because he didn't raise me to be like that. And I think that's very, very important in this whole thing that we got going on right now. And by that, I mean, there's a little while back I did a podcast, words to this effect. Good brothers have to be vociferous about ain't shit brothers. If you haven't heard it, I'll go back and put the link in the comment section below so you can hear it. I often say on this channel that in Black America, we have a bizarro type situation, borrowing from the comic book here. And I know Angry Man understands what I'm talking about because he's into comic book culture and whatnot just as much as I am. So he'll understand what I'm talking about here. You know, you have this bizarro type of situation. You know, and you know, up is down and down is up and left is right and right is left. It's very Orwellian and is literally backward. And you know, there's a very real, I don't want to say culture war, but I guess there's just no other way of saying it. There's a very real culture war or almost civil war in Black America along those lines. We saw this play itself out last year with the whole educated lame debate. You remember what Little Miss Chrissy said? We all remember what she said. She offered an explanation as to why black women, for example, just have to partner with the thugs and the knuckleheads. And her argument was because the educated lame guys didn't assert themselves enough. It's their fault for it. The educated lames made me do it. And when you look at these police shootings of black men, I just read earlier this morning, Andrew Sullivan, white, gay, conservative pundit from the UK originally. Now he works at the New Yorker, I believe. And I was reading what he had to say about the Colin Kaepernick thing of last year. We all know about that. And he laid out some interesting statistics about just how many shootings there are by the police in any given year nationwide. It's a lot smaller than you think. And even smaller still when it comes to black men. And what's interesting about it is that in those cases where the black men are getting shot, in a vast majority of those cases, these are guys who are ne'er-do-wells, the Alton Sterlings of the world. Very rarely do you hear about the Don Calypsos of the world getting gunned down and shot by the cops. Very rarely. It's like a statistical anomaly. So, in the midst of this conversation that I had with Angry Man and Black Gnostic and the other fellas over there on the channel, it was interesting to me to see that main theme emerge. And to tell you the truth, I wasn't going to say anything about it. But since Angry Man has deigned to, you know, go once more unto the breach, I'm more than willing to reciprocate in kind. See, there's something that emerged as we were having that conversation. And here I have to even bring in Black Gnostic. There are two major worldviews among black men in Black America. And one side gets a whole lot of face time. I just talked about Alton Sterling, for example. Hip hop, for easily the past 20 years, if not longer. You know, one of its more recognizable faces ain't Will Smith. You know, it's not him. It's the Tupacs. Let's just be honest about that. And in the black community, let's just be honest. You know, it's the wayward brother, the brother that's, you know, got problems, the brother that's a rebel. You know, matter of fact, even Angry Man even used that language in speaking to me. This idea that, you know, these knuckleheads are like rebels, you know, they're the James Dean of the black community or something. That's BS. It's just a bunch of bunk, man. It cannot be empirically supported at all. Like I said, go back to that book, Black Brothers Incorporated. You'll see this notion of these guys, you know, being rebels without a cause, and when they get the chance to do the damn thing, they really, you know, take it to the next level. That's bunk. Once a criminal, in most cases, not all, there are notable exceptions, but once a criminal, always a criminal. As usually that's how it rolls. The Jay-Z's of the world are the notable exceptions that prove the rule. Okay? So, what emerges for me, and out of this, in that conversation we had the other night, there is two distinct worldviews among black men. There's the worldview among black men, like me. The guys who had strong moral instruction in their life from black men. Strong moral instruction as to what is right and wrong. About doing the right thing, even when it's not popular. Even when it doesn't feel good. And no, you're not going to get the girl for doing the right thing. As a matter of fact, more often than not, you won't. Which is something else Angry Man pointed at and spoke on. And I'm paraphrasing him now. He used words to the effect that, and we've heard this before, he used words to the effect that the lame guys are just mad because they couldn't get the girls that the Pookie and Ray Rays got. That's an interesting statement. And look at what that has done to black America. What has Thug Love done for the black community? For that matter, let's take it to the ladies themselves. What has Thug Love gotten them? Are they better off for it? Are their lives better off for it? Are their children's lives better off for it? Just the other day, I was talking about a story out of Dallas, Texas. What's the chances of those baby mamas there needing to have all these guys come and, be a breakfast and be a, surrogate dad for a day at this public school, which is a shithole. Shout out to Donald Trump. What are the chances that these guys were the guys that they had kids with? We all know the answer to that question. So yeah, there's definitely two different worldviews going on here. A clash of visions, if you will. And on the one side is the guys who receive strong moral instruction from their fathers, their family more generally, and by a supportive society. And on the other hand, you have guys, as the leadoff segment that you heard for yourself from Professor Thomas Sowell, these are guys who honestly believe in this counterculture of thugs and rebels and, that sort of thing. What has that gotten us? Seriously, what has that gotten us? See, I know the reason why that sort of notion holds on or hangs on in black American society. Because as the leadoff segment just pointed out to you, an alibi is always better than an achievement. An alibi is always better than an achievement. If you listen to the guys in that hangout, and I'm including Black Gnostic in this as well as Angry Man, and you listen to me, there's a completely different worldview. See, they're alibi oriented. You listen to Black Gnostic talking, it's always they. Who is they? The Illuminati. All of these people that are somehow over top of you, controlling you like a marionette, and you just have no control over your life. And then you listen to guys like me. I have a can-do attitude, man. If it can be done, it will be done as far as I'm concerned. And my position is, I'm going to do it or die trying. That's my position. Because that's just how I was raised. I was raised by can-do men. My dad, my granddad. And then there were other men who came in and were an adjunct to that. But they were the principal too. So that's, I just have a completely different orientation as to what it means to be a man, what it means to be a black man, what it means to be a black American man. I just have a completely different orientation than they have. And so when you have to deal with people who have a different orientation than you have, and you're based on an alibi mindset rather than an achievement mindset, then it makes sense why you call them names. What else are you going to do? You can't offer a salient counter argument. And as we all know from our studies here at Obsidian Radio, what the wise man of many ages ago said, that personal attacks are the last refuge of scoundrels, man. When you resort to calling your interlocutor names, you have admitted that you've lost the debate. I don't need to call angry man names to prove my point. But I will be very pointed in the following. Guys who are thugs, drug dealers, rapists, just general knuckleheads, they do nothing good for Black America. Nothing good comes from them. Now, do I believe that such guys can be redeemed? Yes. Theoretically, yes. The record, though, tells us something else. The high recidivism rate, you can start there. The numbers of brothers who are truly redeemed after living that kind of lifestyle are relatively small. And even in the case that they do become redeemed, that don't mean that I automatically have to welcome them with open arms, man. I'm not obligated to do that. Why? See, isn't it interesting? Isn't it fascinating? Excuse me, that we don't embrace the good brothers. We don't. We vilify them. We hate them. And I'm going to tell you the reason why. I'm going to tell you the reason why. Because they're achievement oriented. And the people that hate on good brothers, they're alibi oriented. If you don't believe me, just listen to the people who have the most to say about lame brothers. They never talk about achievement in their own lives. It's always somebody else that's holding them back. Racism, colorism, featureism, looksism, body shaming, fat shaming, legacy of slavery, colonialization. It's always something, always somewhere. They, them won't let you. They never talk about achievement. They never talk about personal development. Never. But the guys, the lames, they demonstrate through their actions that they are achievement oriented. They go to school, be that vocational or academic, and make something of themselves. They make something of themselves. They make a good life for themselves as good Americans. That's something else that really chapped Angry Man's hide when I said that. I chapped his hide. He didn't like that shit. Oh, be a good American. Yes, be a good American. My dad and my granddad fought for this country so that their son and grandson could have the chance to be a good American. And you want to know something? For the most part, it's worked. They were right. They were on the right side of history with that move. They were right. Now I'm going to say something that's really going to piss off Angry Man and company. Because he makes the case in his video definition of a coon that guys like me look down on guys like him. Because let's just be honest here. The reason why he took this so to heart, because this is a personal thing for him. So let's just go ahead and lance the boil. Yes, I am better. Yes, I am. I had better moral instruction. When the push came to shove and the pressure time was on, I didn't fold, bend, or crease. I'm not the one that's, making Black America a worse place to live. Never did. That day when I sat down at that table with Spanish Ed was a major, major eye-opener for me. Because it said to me, Obsidian, if you take this money off this table right now, you're no better than the rest of them. What would your father say about you? What would he say? You've been at this man's knee ever since 7 years old. He spent a lifetime trying to show you how to make a life for yourself, and this is the best you can do? This is it? I was listening to Sir Lennon Honor, the Sisterhood White Knight. I got a lot of criticism about him. We're going to get into that today, too. We're going to air it all out here on MLK Day here at Obsidian Radio. Listening to him the other day. 4-hour-long video he made. Talking about Umar Johnson. Dr. Umar Johnson, until his license gets stripped from him. Hopefully that don't happen. Talking about him, Tariq Nasheed, Dr. Boyce Watkins. And he made a really good point. he made a powerful point. Gotta admit, when you're right, you're right. He said, and he was talking about Umar Johnson. He said, there's a pattern of behavior with him that when he's under pressure, he tends to just go kaplooey, man, and just all over the place. And yeah, he's got a point. He makes a really good point. Part of being a man is remaining calm under pressure, man. That's what part of being a man is all about. Because you will be tested. You will be tested as a man in your life. That was one of the big tests for me. That day, that summer day at 9th and Cambria, sitting at Spanish Ed's table while he's counting over $250,000 in cash. I've known people who work on Wall Street. They ain't never seen that kind of money in cash before. And it's highly unlikely that anybody listening to the show right now has seen it either. Especially at the age of 18. I was able to resist it because of the moral training I got from my dad and my granddad. It made a difference. It made a difference. See, in Black America, oh no, we don't want to talk about right or wrong. Only God can judge me. It's bunk. It's bunk. Black America is rife with fucked up bad decisions. Not only that, not just one-offs, but bad decision after bad decision. I mean, and then we get mad when somebody wants to point it out. Somebody dares to notice it, now we're going to get mad at them. Yeah, I'm better than the drug dealers, man. Yes, I'm better than the knucklehead thugs. Yes, I'm better than them. Yes, they should be emulating my example and the example of other good brothers who made something out of themselves and who walked the fine line. Day after day after day. Yes, we're better. Look at me, better. And if more brothers was emulating that, we wouldn't have so many of these problems that we have to begin with. Now, would we? Would we no need to be taking a knee and all this nonsense? Would we? Now I know what you're going to say. Well, if we had more dads involved, this is what Sir Lyndon Honor would say. If you had more dads involved, we had that to begin with. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you one little bit, but you know where that starts. We got to go around robin back to what Angry Man was talking about. These guys are just mad because the women they want get with the thugs. Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of truth in that statement. And what do? They produce with the worst of us, then don't get the proper guidance they need. Now all of a sudden we got to go and fix the community. Fuck no. No. I ain't fixing shit. If they want the community fixed so bad, let Angry Man go down there to Dallas. He can do it. I don't see him hopping the first thing smoking down there. This idea that somehow these guys are the rebels that's going to seize the parapet when the revolution comes, that's bullshit. Bunk. Those so-called revolutionaries out there in Chirac can jump bad if they want to. Let the motherfucking from Marine Corps get in there on their ass. And we'll find out who really is made of what. So, I mean, for me, I'm glad that Angry Man brought this to the forefront. Because, like I said, my original initial impetus or impulse was to just let it go. Just, you know what, I'm not even going to talk about it. But I'm glad he brought it up because we need to talk about this. We do need to talk about it. For too long, the inmates have run the asylum in Black America. For too fucking long. Good black men need to start speaking the fuck up. And stop just taking this shit. Taking the abuse. Being a whipping boy for everything that goes wrong in Black America when the shit could have been avoided in the first fucking place. We gotta stop exalting fake the funk rebels and knuckleheads as if they're somehow gonna improve Black America. You gotta be kidding me. Take a look around you. The smoldering fucking crater that was Detroit. We can start there. We just need to stop it. No, I have zero interest Zero. In attempting to, somehow commiserate with knuckleheads. No, I don't. Because I've seen what they're like up close and personal. They don't mean anybody well, man. I'm sorry, they don't. This idea that, the noble savage. No, man. There's a reason why they call them savages. There's a reason for it. People that call them noble savages haven't actually lived around any. There's a reason for it. My cousin, when he got his brains blown out, that's what he deserved, man. He lived by the sword and he died by it. Big difference between me and him, because we was contemporaries. Big difference. I had a strong dad and granddad in my life. He didn't. His mom thought that she could raise her boy just as well as any man. She was wrong. The streets proved her wrong. So yeah, I'm glad that this all came up. I'm very, very glad. People with an alibi mindset call people names. People with an achievement mindset just lay out the facts and let the chips fall where they may. Choose today who's who in this debate between Angry Man and the O Man. You're listening to Obsidian Radio, which is 100% supported by listeners like you. And if you like what you heard on today's podcast talk show, heard only on YouTube, then what the heck are you waiting for? Put 5 on it and become one of the 300 Patreons I need to stay on the air getting bigger and better. All the details are going to be over on my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Mumia Obsidian Ali. Do it now. You'll be glad that you did. And for those who wish to become soldados in the invisible army here at Obsidian Radio, all you need to do is hit up yours truly first at theobsidianfiles@hotmail or at gmail.com. Put in the subject line donations, and I'll be sure to walk you through from there. $5, $5,000. You give whatever you think the show is worth on a recurring monthly basis. I so greatly and deeply appreciate that. And when you do, you go down on the mailing list to receive the official and exclusive Obsidian Radio newsletter. I so greatly and deeply appreciate that, my friends. Please don't forget also to like, share, and subscribe this and other channels in the Obsidian Media Network universe. Please don't forget to bang the bell so you know every time that yours truly got something coming fresh from the kitchen back there for you. Lastly, please don't forget to share this podcast with a brother that you know, love, and respect. The life you save may very well be his. My name is Mumia Obsidian Ali, and I approve this message, you weak-ass alibi-having niggas. Have a happy MLK Day. Stay tuned. We'll be back. Peace.
Excuse me, brothers and sisters, please. If someone could just turn off.
King looked out on his people and saw they were in great need. So he did what all great leaders do. He told them the truth.
Will you ignorant niggas please shut the hell up?
He just said what I think he said.
Is this it? This is what I got all those ass whoopings for? I had a dream once. It was a dream that little black boys and little black girls would drink from the river of prosperity, freed from the thirst of oppression. But lo and behold, some 4 decades later, what have I found but a bunch of trifling, shiftless, good-for-nothing niggas? And I know some of you don't want to hear me say that word. It's the ugliest word in the English language, but that's what I see now, niggas. And you don't want to be a nigga, cause niggas are living contradictions. Niggas are full of unfulfilled ambitions. Niggas wax and wane. Niggas love to complain. Niggas love to hear themselves talk but hate to explain. Niggas love being another man's judge and jury. Niggas procrastinate until it's time to worry. Niggas love to be late. Niggas hate to hurry. Black entertainment television is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Usher, Michael Jackson is not a genre of music. And now I'd like to talk about Soul Plane. I've seen what's around the corner. I've seen what's over the horizon. And I promise you, you niggas have nothing to celebrate. And no, I won't get there with you. I'm going to Canada.